So Liz Free is a CEO and director from the International School of the Rheintal. She's a teacher, head teacher and director, leader of professional learning and development. She's done it all. She's an advocate for the global profession, and she presents a lot about that and how the global profession is growing and in need of teachers. She's a board member for the TES Institute, as well as a newly appointed board member of the Swiss Group of International Schools, as the strategic leader for WomenEd. And so she also oversees all of the groups in Europe, including ours. So whenever we don't know anything, we're like, Liz, help us. And also an author of one of the chapters in the book that was edited by WomenEd leaders, a chapter in that called 10% Braver, Inspiring Women to Lead Education. So without further ado, I'm going to stop my screen share and over to you, Liz.
Okay, let me see. I've got to share my screen, haven't I? That would be a good start. Hold on. Any moment now. It's going to be a beautiful thing.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to try again. There we go. See, we should be a dab hand at this by now, shouldn't we? Yay! There we go. So, hi, everybody. Wow, it's Saturday. Can you believe it? It's nearly June. I know how I'm feeling, and I'm sure you're all feeling just a little bit weary at this point. So hopefully this session will be interesting and kind of keep you going. And most importantly, that you'll get something useful out of it. But before we start, I just saw somebody saying that Angeline is awesome. She is. Bravo, Angeline, for kind of keeping it together, and an amazing team that you work with as well. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. You're too kind. But just also want to call out the whole team has been behind the scenes helping all day. So thank you so much.
Yes, of course. But the Angeline, when someone, see, this is what women do, is you thank somebody and then they thank somebody else, although we must thank other people. But Angeline, I'm thanking you in this moment. Okay, moving on today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the data globally. I'm going to have a slight bias towards international schools, because I noticed by the number of attendees, by some of your backgrounds, that there is a slight bias towards that. So I'm going to talk about some of the data. Some of it you may have already seen today, but it's quite a nice roundup about, why are we here? What should we be focusing on? What can we do, and how do we move things forward? And should we be moving things forward? So here we go. This is the plan. It's going to be easy, a gentle stroll on a Saturday afternoon. So there we go. We're going to start with the data, the big stuff. Then we're going to talk about some of the priorities. I'm going to think about what the lessons that have been learned in recent years, particularly. I want to focus on personal stories, and I want to focus on you as well, and we'll do that a little bit later. And then, of course, the last bit is, how do we move forward? And at the end of the day, I'm sure with all the amazing people that would have been facilitating and people that you would have been meeting virtually, that there's going to be loads of things kind of ruminating in your mind. But like all good endeavors, if you take one great thing from it, then it's been a day well spent. So let's aim for that. So let's start at the beginning. So WomenEd started in England, and I wasn't involved at that time. It was involved, a group of women had seen this data that had come out in England, and they were kind of ranting a little bit on Twitter about it and being suitably outraged by what was going on. Apologies if you can hear some kind of strange noise in the background. It's my neighbor deciding to do something. I've no idea what, but I'll keep going. So this data came out, and this group of women, when they saw this, they were like, there's something not right here. If 74% of the teaching workforce is female in England, this is in England, then why is it that we're only heading to these kind of figures when we're looking at the number of head teachers? In secondary schools, it's 36%, and in primary, it's 71%. Now, we know there's a differential between primary and secondary, but there's something a little bit strange in terms of the data. Interestingly, we'll come to this in a minute, in the international sector, it's far worse, but let's move it on. And then they came across this as well. And they started to look at the number of heads, started to look at the pay of head teachers. And in England, some of you may know, they have a scaled system. So In theory, there should be no inequity based on number of years of experience, if you take it on that measure. However, what we discover is that it depends where you come in on the scale. And the number of times, I was actually sat in a CIS meeting just 3 weeks ago, 3-4 weeks ago, and I had 3 people talking about gender equity and diversity. And one of the things they said is that because they have a scale, there's no inequity in their schools. Well, England's had a scale for over 40 years, and we can see here that there is absolute inequity. And one of the major reasons, there are many reasons, but one of the major reasons is at the natural transition point. So when you enter as a teacher, when you then move jobs, maybe when you first take on responsibility, at all these points of change, men tend to get more of an incremental increase than women. So either they'll get a responsibility allowance earlier, or they'll be put on a point when they move, they'll be jumped up a point because they come with some other experience or there's some other justification. And then you get to this cumulative effect that primary head teachers end up being paid £1,600 less, and then you can see the same with head teachers in secondary schools, although the gap is not quite as bad. But if you look at classroom teachers, you've got to wonder. So this group of women came together and founded WomenEd. WomenEd's now a global network of over 40,000 people. I've given up counting the number of networks, country networks. I don't know, I think maybe we're around 31, but that's kind of a guess because they keep growing. And what we've discovered in the work that we've been doing is there's great synergy. Well, I don't know if great's the right word. There's synergy, let's go with that. There's synergy in many countries around the world where we see that education tends to be a feminized profession. I mean, that's an issue in its own right. But what we see is that women don't necessarily make it through in proportionate numbers into leadership. And when they do, they get paid less and they get disadvantaged in other ways. One of the other issues that we see in the international sector particularly is we see a larger pay gap. Now this, as you can see in 2018 was 23%. I'm going to talk more about that in a moment. This is really difficult data to capture, so it's a little bit wobbly. In the most recent report from CIS, I need to mention here that this isn't for publication, so please don't take any photos of this. You can contact CIS, and if you're a CIS school, they will share it with you. But in their latest report, which was in 2020, they noted that women get paid 11.7% less. Now you'll notice in the same data compiled in 2018, it was 23%. So I had a chat with CIS. I was like, yes, this is marvelous. In just 3 years, we've been able to close the gender pay gap in international schools by quite a significant margin. And then they said, no, Liz, it doesn't work like that. I'm an English graduate, obviously not a mathematician or a statistician. I can't even say it. Anyway, what they said to me is it's not a longitudinal study. So they don't have the same people necessarily responding in 2021, 2020, as they had in 2018. So this makes this data really hard to look at. So what is the pay gap? Is there a pay gap? There's still lots of questions around that. But in this particular survey, what they also noted, which is the first time I think that we've really started to see some of this data and had a light shone on it, is if you are white, you get paid significantly more than if you're not white. And if you happen to be a woman that is not white, then in the kind of the great pay scales, you come in right at the bottom, purely on account of ethnicity and gender. And this is taken on the CIS data like for like. So the same number of years teaching, same number of years in administration and or leadership. So it deals with this whole issue of maternity leave as well. So some people kind of throw that in, oh, well, women would have had a couple of years out if they've had children. Well, it takes into account all of that. So we can see in the international sector, in the domestic English sector, and also if we look here at Switzerland, and before this I was in the Netherlands. I think you had Sue Aspinall earlier today as well. I don't know, Sue, I think you might still be there as well. I saw your name earlier. So Sue and I set up WomenEd Netherlands back in 2017. I can't believe it. And there, the Netherlands has the highest proportion of part-time working in education in Europe, and yet it has one of the worst gender pay gaps in Europe as well in terms of pay and women into education leadership. So there's a significant issue in education. And there's been further research in different countries. And if I take one example of England, in England, if you've got a company size of over 150 employees, you have to publish your employment data, and you have to publish the pay gap in your organization. And what's interesting, in the school groups, or schools which have over 150 staff, they also have to publish this data. And what they found is that the gender pay gap is worse in education than it is in mining. Which is, I don't know why I'm laughing, but maybe because I've got this idea about mining, that mining, you know, the gender pay gap in mining would be huge between men and women, but somehow in education it's worse. So we've got a real issue that we need to address. And I'm a CEO and director of a school, and I talk a lot, all of the time, every day. I'm talking about our mission, vision, values. What sort of school are we? In the international sector, I'm always talking about international mindedness, that I've got a global view, that we are an equitable organization. We value diversity. And yet, do we really value that? Do we value that in our staff? Do we value that in the makeup of our staff and the pay of our staff? And that raises lots of questions for us as school leaders and school boards as to what does this mean when we recruit, and what does this mean when we advocate for colleagues around us as they start to move through the profession. We've got to do better. We've got to do a whole lot better, and we owe it to our young people. And actually, they should expect us to do better. Anyway, I thought I'd throw this in because I saw this the other day and I thought, no, here we go. McKinsey, we all like McKinsey. McKinsey do all kinds of amazing reports around gender equity and the economic impact of women not realizing their potential. And what they say is, if women that make up 51% of the population don't realize their economic potential, then that's a massive global issue for global economies, and particularly for developing countries. And so when you look at this data, we've got such a way to go right across the board, and we've got to start modeling what we expect for society, and we have the ability to do that within our schools. And we're going to talk more about how we can do that in a moment. I would also flag there's some amazing reports that McKinsey do. One of the reports, which I'll come to in a moment as well, it's pretty shocking, is they looked at graduates. They looked at women and men who were leaving university and starting their professional careers in all kinds of different fields, so not exclusive to education. And what they discovered is that women on entry to professions were more aspirant to leadership than their male colleagues. And yet within 2 years, that figure had fallen below their male colleagues. And when they researched why, so I started to think, well, this is around, they're in their mid-20s at this point. Maybe, it's a bit early for many women, but maybe it's the children thing kicking in. I don't know. That was kind of what some of the questions that I had. But what they actually discovered, there were two major reasons as to why women said that they felt less aspirational into leadership at that point. One was because the representations of the leadership, the women leaders that they saw in their professional fields, did not resonate with them. They did not see themselves in the representations of female leadership. And that is a major issue for us, and something that we really need to take quite seriously. Is we need to make sure that we are within our own schools, and us as leaders, and myself as a female leader, is that I am also showing different aspects of leadership. It doesn't have to be one way. It doesn't have to be one way for anyone. It doesn't matter what your gender is. There's very many ways of leading a school. You don't have to be the person that stays at the school till, leaves school at 7, 8 o'clock at night and is sat there doing their emails till midnight. You don't have to be the leader that spends the whole weekend working and therefore you can't have a family. Equally, if that's the sort of leadership that works for you, that's fine too. But what we need to have in terms of women leadership is greater diversity in the representation of how to be a leader. So that's one thing that came from the McKinsey report. The second thing, and I really dislike this, and I've challenged it, I find it very uncomfortable personally, but the second reason cited that was given in terms of data as statistical significance was that women were less likely to be given critical and constructive feedback from their colleagues and their line managers than their male colleagues. And one of the reasons that was cited is that because they were fearful of women being upset. And so what happens is that you don't get honesty and honest feedback earlier on in your career. in the same way that male colleagues do. Now, I still find this very uncomfortable, but this is what the data from this particular study has showed. Again, that's really interesting for me, is how do we work with early career teachers? What is the feedback that we're giving? How are we giving feedback? How are we making sure that we stop the attrition in the profession right across the world, because this is not exclusive to any one country, and that we keep our early career teachers and we keep our early career teachers aspirant into leadership, and that they can see themselves in that kind of role in the future. So what have we been doing? So this is kind of the situation, which is rather depressing on a Saturday afternoon, particularly as some of you might have, is it still raining in Berlin? There you go. See, the sun's coming out. It's a sign. It's a sign. There we go. So in WomenEd, we've been developing the network around the world, completely voluntary movement. So everybody here who has been setting up the event today, everyone gives their time completely freely. There's no money exchanges hands. Nobody gets paid. It's really about by the profession for the profession. And so what our core mission is to support existing and aspiring women leaders in education. That's what we're looking to do. And we do this through global networks, strategic networks. We do it at regional level, at country level. And the aim is that we start to advocate for each other, build professional practice, share knowledge and expertise, and also raise the issue of gender equity and make sure that it's being heard and that we're effecting a change for our own generation and the generations that come next. So we have 4 major campaigns at the moment, and these kind of shift and change over time. Although I have to say, unfortunately, this one has not shifted for some time. They're quite big areas that we're aspiring to change. The first thing is we reduce the gender pay gap. That's but on every single measure, this is not acceptable. And there's things that I'm doing in my own school. I've taken off previous salary on the job application form. I'd like to take off marital status as well. I actually did. I did take it off, and then it got put back on again. But the reason why is we needed to have it on because of permit and legal requirements here in this area. But we're trying to do things like that. So little things that we can do as schools, and say loudly that we're doing that we think it's important to pay people fairly and pay them what the job is worth. And also be cognizant of the fact that having a pay scale does not devolve you of responsibility. Not only that, but using an agency does not devolve you of responsibility. It did irritate me fairly. I don't often get irritated, I don't think, but I was quite irritated a few weeks ago when I had a couple of head teachers say to me that they don't ask for the previous salary. In fact, they were telling me that they don't ask for gender. However, they told me the global agency that they use for recruitment, both of whom both collect that data. So I was like, just because someone else does it doesn't mean that it's okay. So we've got to do better and be really intentional about how we recruit, how we pay. We need to be honest as organizations and be open to saying, we think what we've got maybe is fair, like the UK, they have a very structured pay scale system, but be willing and open enough to be challenged on that, to really look at that with fresh eyes and say, is what we believe to be true? Not only that, flexible working practices. This is, like I said, a significant issue. In the Netherlands, they have very high levels of flexible working. Here in Switzerland as well, in terms of female working, is high levels of part-time working, but of course at the lower end of the pay scales. And so we want to look at how can we have flexible working, thinking about our driver into women in education leadership, is we don't want women to start falling out of education leadership. We particularly see this across the world when women hit their late 40s and early 50s. And what they start to do, we start to see that they call it like the double whammy, as you start to potentially have teenage children, elderly parents, and there is not exclusively, but there is a bias towards the responsibilities of that falling on women. And not only that, but we also see, and I hate to say it, but it's true, we have a little bit of perfectionism going on in our female education world. I mean, same with men as well, actually, but we see it with women. And when you bring this triad together, increased responsibility, often increased responsibility in school, because you've got to a certain point in your career where you often take on more. So you've got responsibilities in school, and the pressure just comes in and in and in, and then throw the menopause into that as well. I mean, dare I say, I actually said it in a board meeting the other day. I was the only female in the room, and there was like a gasp. And I was like, yes, we are talking about the menopause. We are a feminized profession. 78% of our working population in education is female. And if we look at the working age, we're probably looking around 40% at any one point are going through the menopause in some way. So this is quite a significant issue that we need to be cognizant of. And so when these things all hit at the same time, what can happen for some women is that they just say no thanks to leadership. It's like, I've got enough on, thanks. I can't do everything. And so I'm going to give that up. And schools very kindly say, yes, we're going to help you by taking off your leadership responsibility, and you can be just a teacher. Now, I don't use that phrasing, but that is some of the idea that somehow being just a teacher is less stressful. I don't know if maybe some of these people have been in the classroom recently, but anyway, moving on. So what we're trying to look at is, can we start to case study and show examples of where women can be, we can use, because this is significant levels of professional expertise by this point in your career. We don't want to lose you. So if you've got other things going on in your life, or you want to do other things in your life, it's not just because you're forced to, maybe you want to, what can we do as schools to continue to harness the potential that you have and benefit from your expertise? But it doesn't have to be full time. You don't have to do it 5 days a week. What are the different ways of looking at it? And in the international sector, this is even more challenging for us, because many of us have got are running schools where we're linked to country systems, permit systems, and many of that links with full-time working. But we've got to start thinking creatively and start using the network of someone like WomenEd and other networks, both in your own country and across the world, to say, this is what we're operating within. We want to harness the potential of everybody in our profession for the benefit of our young people. And so we're going to try this. We're going to try that. Some things will work, some things won't. But let's come from a point of recognizing the professional expertise of our profession and valuing and trusting that. Anyway, I'm on my high horse. I'm going to keep moving. Diversity and representation in leadership roles. This is so challenging, particularly for the international sector, because again, how many of us say on our websites how many nationalities we have, how many of us talk about how international we are, and yet you walk into the school and you see that board, the board of teachers, or the board you see your governing boards, predominantly white, in terms of boards, predominantly male as well. And I have no issue with my male colleagues. I think our male colleagues are amazing, but I want to see equity, because it's the boards that recruit the heads. It's the heads that recruit the teachers. So we've got to start, for me, this is kind of my big thing at the moment, is how do we really work on the representation of your mission, vision, and values in your board representation. And I really hope that organizations like CIS, ECIS, COBIS continue to take the mantle on this and drive this initiative with boards, because we've got to start there. Somebody asked me recently, or I put on Twitter recently, that they asked the question about, what's the makeup of the boards that you've been interviewed by for the jobs that you've had? And it got me thinking. I thought, right, I've had 3 headships, 3 school headships. I've been a head of professional learning at Oxford. I've had I set up the International Leadership Academy at BSN in the Netherlands. And so I've had 2 director positions, and now I'm a CEO. I've only ever been interviewed by white people in all of those roles. Then I started to think, well, what's the gender makeup of those that I've actually been interviewed by for these types of roles? And I have been interviewed by some women, but predominantly men. And so we have to do better at our board representation to then start to influence from the top down. And we've also got to push from the bottom up. This is not a one size fits all, that you do one thing and it solves this issue. It's kind of, it's this idea of incremental gains. We've got to tweak lots of different aspects and come at it from every angle within our organizations to really affect a change, and make sure that our schools represent the communities that they serve, if that's what we genuinely believe in, which many of our schools will say that they do. And of course, ultimately, what we want to see more women leaders in education. We want to see it proportionally represented, so that we know that we're really benefiting from the expertise of our entire community. And so WomenEd is predominantly in terms of social media because it's free and easy to use. It's a way of quickly connecting around the world. We have the YouTube channel, we have Facebook, we've got the website, which is always under development. We've got the books, and the books, actually, the money from the books go into the website and infrastructure. We've got partnerships with organizations like ECIS, who've been amazing in supporting WomenEd, and many of the people here today have been involved in that. So we're kind of chipping away at the edges. But like all good things, you get the big stuff and then you get the little stuff, but actually the little stuff becomes the big stuff. And so I started to think about personal reflections about what is the difference that really makes a difference. I started to think about my own journey, actually. And as I was preparing for today and thinking about, well, what's made the difference for me? How is it that I have had the fortune to be able to do what I do? And one of the things that I think was really powerful for me, and it actually brought me back to that McKinsey report that I mentioned earlier about feedback, is I've always had amazing mentorship. And that mentorship hasn't been, I'm now, you are, can you be my mentor? Or somebody coming to me and saying, can I be your mentor? It's never been that. It's been somebody that has recognized something in me, and somebody that I look to and think, oh, they're really amazing at what they do. They're the people that in the staff room I would sit and have a coffee with, right from when I was 20 years old and started in the profession, to when I was had my first leadership position, was leading science, to then becoming a head. I've always had these people. And I have to say, predominantly they've been male. And they're people who give me time, and they would talk with me, and we'd be discussing education stuff, and I'd be saying, and sometimes facing challenges and saying, well, I did this, this and this, and it's the right thing to do. And they'd say, yes, but Liz, did you think of it like this? So somebody that's willing to be honest with me in a safe space. And so find those people. When I say find your tribe, they might not be in your tribe. Sometimes it's good to look at somebody else's tribe. But find some people that you trust and that you can learn from. People that maybe are further in their career or have got some other kind of expertise. They have something that you want to develop, and talk to them. And I have to say, in our profession, whenever I've known anyone that asked, say, can I have some of your time? Can I talk to you about this? Everybody always says yes. They might not be able to do it like that day, but they will say, yes, I will. Let's find a time. Let's talk. We are a collegiate profession. So that's the first thing. I had amazing informal peer mentors that I learned from deeply. So that was the first thing. The other thing is this big thing at the moment about workload, and one of the issues around women taking work but not the opportunities. So what I've always done in my career is said yes. So if something comes up, I say yes to it. Now that creates a little bit of a problem now and again, because it's I do have to manage my workload. But what I've learned is not saying yes to work, it's saying yes to opportunity. So I could just give you a recent example, and it was Angela mentioned the SGIS things. That's the Swiss Group of International Schools. I moved to Switzerland in the summer. And about 2 weeks into my new school, this letter came from SGIS saying, we want new board members. You've got to sign up and you've got to be voted in, rah, 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 rah. And I thought, I can't do this. I've just got too much on. I'm 2 weeks in. I just need a period of stability. And I thought, well, I can't sit here and say there's not representation if I'm not willing to put myself forward. So I thought, I've got a professional duty of care to put myself forward. So I did. And I mean, it was a very interesting experience, and I had to be voted in public, which was a bit embarrassing. But anyway, it was all okay, thank goodness. Otherwise, I would have been mortified. But there's an opportunity where I'm now on the board, and I commit what I can do. I'm not the person who's going to write the minutes in the board. I'm not the person who is going to take on admin in the board. I'm a person that's able to bring a professional level of expertise in the field that I have and share that. And so those are the little examples of how you stay connected. Now that has already been of huge value, not just to me and my own development and looking for these people, these peer mentors, because I'm still looking for them now, always looking for them, people I can learn from, and I already am. But it's also helped me in my job. We've been in a period of COVID. Some of you may know my school. We're a small school. 4 weeks ago, we had a major outbreak in our school. I had 12 cases of COVID. It's the first time we've had that here since the beginning of the pandemic. I had to put our school into remote learning and closure. And we also had a parental bereavement in the middle of that as well. So it's been an incredibly challenging time for our school community. And yet the SGIS group, because I'd said yes to that group and I've now got this ready-made network, is all of those heads and principals came together and supported me. And when I had a question, I was like, what do I do with this? And I sent a message to a couple of them and they all came onto Zoom and we all had, some had a cup of tea, I had a glass of wine, I have to confess. And we sat down and we talked about what I was facing and they helped me. So say yes, that was one of the things that I learned. Then the last thing that I learned, which is linked to this, is around network. And it's kind of connected, is build your network, build your friendships, get to know other people. And that's what WomenEd can do for you. So I just want to share a little bit of my own personal experiences, but I want you to share yours now. Now, I don't know how to do this, but I'm sure Angeline has extraordinary expertise. I can see the ladies in the background that are like ready to go. I'd like us to go into, I don't know how we're doing for time, but I'd like us to move into groups. If this is possible, Angeline?
Yes, it's possible. Yeah, they're ready to go.
Okay, take a photo of this. Because if you're like that, I don't know how to put this in the groups. So take a photo of the questions. And I'd just like you to, oh, not this one, no, wrong slide. Haha, this slide. And I'd like you just to share for a few moments your own experiences and then start to consider what are the implications. Because at the end of the day, what we want to come out with is intention. At least one intention that you're going to say, right, I'm going to do this and it's going to make a difference. Angeline, over to you.
Okay, great. I'm opening up the rooms and I'm going to take 5 minutes. Yeah.
Perfect. We can solve it in 5 minutes. No problem.
Sure.
Here, and of course, I mean, Angeline has just been such a pillar, and she really is amazing. But you know, the whole idea of the professional duty of care, I think, as women and lifting each other up, it's been monumental. And as much as I feel that I have helped others in this year and I've supported others in enlisting in the movement, I have gained so much myself personally from having joined this group. And I have been able to meet the likes of you and get to know Ange better. And this is just such an amazing platform. So I want to say thank you, especially to you, Liz, for being a strategic leader, and for Ange as well for being the glue that binds us all in Germany. And I hope that everybody has enjoyed being a part of this day, which has been wonderful. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, Joya. It's been an absolute pleasure to bring the regional leaders together, as well as all of you who are committing to joining us today. And we want to hear more of your commitments this year and I loved what the students said about International Women's Day. It should be Feminist Fight Day, they said, instead of International Women's Day. So, you know, yeah. So what can we choose to challenge as feminist fighters here? And so share with us what you'll choose to challenge. If you are on Twitter, tweet it out with the hashtag WomenEd and with our Twitter handle. If not, just pop it into the chat because so you had a little breakout room where you were probably talking about it. And so put in here your commitment and to change and what you're going to choose to challenge. And let me see if I can do this properly. I'm going to stop sharing my screen because, as you can see, this is the Choose to Challenge pose. And we would love to take a group shot if you are keen to have your video on. If not, then just put yourself on hide. And then one of my more techie members of the regional leader team will take a screenshot of us. And so we're going to commit to our challenge, what we've identified that we're going to challenge. And this is the pledge that we're going to make moving forward. All right, so this is the pledges. So I'm going to just stop sharing my screen, and everyone who's there, we're going to pledge for change here, people. Yeah, and so big smiles. All right, I hope someone's taking a snapshot. Dan, I need you. Someone.
I just did.
Okay, everyone. Okay, great. Excellent. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us in this wonderful day. Thank you so much to all of the regional leaders for doing this. I'd like to end with an inspirational quote that I can no longer accept the things I cannot change, and I'm changing the things I cannot accept. And so there've been a lot of things that we've talked about, wide range of issues, wide range of things. And I know that we've prepared a feedback survey for you as well. So we're going to pop that into the chat as well. Please fill that in, especially I know many of you who have been here most of the day. And as you go into your institutions next and in the future, think about how are your actions promoting gender equity, or are they perpetuating inequity perhaps? Are you part of upholding maybe historically patriarchal structures, or part of empowering women in education? So what will you do? So this is also part of your pledge to choose a challenge. So thank you for sharing with us what you will do. And I'm sure that I better just remind Julia, please save the chat as well so we can share out some of the reflections that have come through. And so thank you for being part of all the different little incremental gains that I know with all of your actions are going to make towards promoting gender equity. And if you're interested in taking some more actions, become a regional leader, reach out to us, share, or maybe you're going to share your expertise as a presenter. So reach out to us, and then we can also organize an event based around your area of expertise. And do give us the feedback. You can, in the feedback, we're asking you the same questions so that you can indicate in the survey what you'd like to do. So thank you so much for the team for doing that. And keep up to date with us on all our events. Join us when you join us on Twitter, you'll see, and on our Instagram handle, it takes you to a Linktree event. And so as you can see, we have an upcoming event on the 8th of June with Fran Pullman that the Frankfurt group is hosting, and so that's of course what's great about being online is that everyone can join from all over, not just in Frankfurt as well. And so thank you so much for being part of our community here today, and I hope that you will join us again in the near future.